Hello and welcome back to the Next Canon podcast. My name is Danny Ray and I am your host on this wonderful magical podcast that I've had so much fun working on and can't wait to do even more on. And I am an actor, director, and audition coach. If you are interested in learning more about what I do outside of this podcast, I encourage you to go to dannyray.com and learn more about my audition training. You can also check out my Instagram and you can communicate with me there on who you want to see on the podcast, any topics you have questions about, or things you want me to ask people on my podcast. So go to my Instagram, hit me up there. The link is going to be right in the description for you. It's Danny_Marie_Ray. Today's episode is a little bit different. I am currently by myself, just thinking about all the fantastic conversations that I have had since I started recording in August and since I put my podcast out there on December 8th of 2020. I'm so grateful for all the support and all of the love that I have been sent. It has meant so much to me to have people interested in what I am doing and support my mission here. So, as you know, if you've been listening, the mission on this podcast is to recreate and reimagine the American theater canon to make it more inclusive and representative of what our community really is and what we want that community to look like. So the concept came to me because I feel like I've had a lot of conversations with my friends about how harmful some shows that they've been in were to them and how harmful they can be to other people and audiences, and debriefing about shows that had a negative impact on us and for many different reasons. My hope is that we can start more conversations about awesome new or young work so that we can promote that work and create a new canon that is more colorful and more inclusive and beautiful and different, that's more representative of the time that we are in right now. I think that's important because we should be showing a mirror of what we are currently, not what we were 100 years ago or 200 years ago. So I wanted to make this recap video of season 1. Thank you so much for listening to season 1, by the way. It was an absolute joy, and I cannot wait to share with you what we've been working on for season 2. It comes out just next week, so please stay tuned. But in this episode here, I wanted to give anyone who hasn't listened to or watched all of the episodes a chance to meet everyone who was in season 1 and hear some of the things they had to say. If you want to hear more about their episodes, you can find them in this in the season and use this as sort of like a get to know them sort of thing. All right, so the very first type of question that made me want to do this podcast was, what shows have got to go? What shows are just harmful and like not necessary right now? And I had so many different opinions on this on the podcast. So let's hear what season 1 said was their show that's got to go.
We're not quite at the point where it's like canon yet, I think, but I don't want to see Kiki Boots survive the test of time.
Okay.
I think there are so many better shows as far as like having drag on stage. I think you've got like La Cage aux Folles if you really want to see more of that drag on stage, especially drag that is not just limited to male performers. I think if you're looking for, you know, a show that it's about the like coming of age of a character within the context of drag, I'm blanking on the full title of it, but it's the Jamie. I know the main character's name is Jamie, but it's a more recent show about like a gay kid kind of in his coming of age. But I also think Kinky Boots is like just this kind of weird piece of music theater that like it came out in the mid 2010s, and for a show that's like it's got drag queens and it's got like a significant gay character, it's very focused on holding the hand of its straight white leads for the most part. And you know, the gay character only kind of exists to further the other straight white characters. And I'm just like, there's better shows to do, because I do want to get rid of Kinky Boots, but I don't want to get rid of Black actors getting to be openly queer on stage, you know?
Okay, I really thought about this because I think there are many shows that truly have to go. I think for me personally, it has to be anything written by Edward Albee, like straight up. And I just like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and like that whole scandal of just like his estate not allowing to cast an African American male because it just like wouldn't be historically accurate, which like we're theater makers, like we choose to, I think, push the boundaries of like what is actuality and reality, like with just like setting up theater in itself. And so I don't know, I think personally for me, if we have an estate that like does not even allow that kind of push forward in the right direction and push forward in the future, I think that we should just stop doing his plays if we can't even cast like
if they were actively racist and saying like you can't do this even after I'm dead, like
it's
rude.
It's like we know that there would never be like an African American Macbeth historically, or like an African American King Henry V historically. Like we are all well aware
we know
of the way politics and racism works in our society. But I think like pushing the boundaries and having that representation is just so important, because you do that play and there are tons of Black and brown, hopefully tons of Black and brown kids who are able to see that work and understand. Like I saw Leah Salonga and I was like, I can do this. This is crazy. Like representation, I think, is way more beneficial than being historically accurate for the sake of racism.
So what's your big show that's got to go? What is it?
How I Learned to Drive.
Yeah.
100%. And I feel like only like 1% bad, because I do have people that I love and respect who do love the show, and I'm like, that's fine. But as a woman in today's world, that show is hard.
The picture that pops into my head is like the Getty Images one that, like, if you look it up, it's that, you know, the image. Please don't look it up, but it's just this very uncomfortable photo. And it's also in the Bedford that we use when we do that. It's the picture that's like on the thing, and I'm like, that picture makes me so uncomfortable. But for anyone who doesn't know, tell us a little bit about the show and why we don't like it.
So How I Learned to Drive is essentially about this woman looking back on her life where she basically had a sexual relationship with her uncle from the ages of, I might get this a little bit wrong, but about 12 until about 18. And I auditioned for this show kind of, and I had heard of it, of course, many times. I had never read it before I auditioned for this show a couple years ago. And reading it was like one like I was like starting to look into it, and the thing that really like that I like got stuck in my mind a lot was I started watching because it's been done on Broadway so many times. I watched interviews with the actors who did it the last time it was on Broadway in like the early 2000s, maybe closer to 2010, and the actress who was playing the main girl literally says if we're doing the play right, you will, something along the lines of, forget their age difference. It won't be gross to you, type of her language. And I was like, excuse me? I was like, we're supposed to watch this play and be okay with a 40-something-year-old man having a sexual relationship with his niece. That's the goal of the play, is to be okay with that? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And the big problem that I have is that there's one, and the reason that I was so infuriated.
What's one of your biggest shows that's got to go? Something you don't want to see anymore? Like it's a fine show, or it sucks and is really, really bad. We just don't need to see it anymore for whatever reason.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is Thoroughly Modern Millie. Do you know that musical?
I do know that musical.
Yeah, okay, great. It's just something that American high schools really love to do, and it's probably because the main role is it's like a strong female role.
Yeah.
And usually in American high schools, the people that are really turning it out and serving are the young girls. So I get it. But Thoroughly Modern Millie is just, it's a dumpster fire. Like any musical that is Yes, right. The dialogue is like, what year are we in? It just like jumps back and forth. Some of the music is fun, but like, okay. And then it's
some
all
really great chord progressions happening, but like, at what cost?
Right. Why do I need to have, why is there literally a musical about white slavery?
To make that even more questionable, the first time I saw it at a high school, the lead, whose name is eluding me, was played by a Black woman, and the only Black woman in their theater, their cast. Yeah, that face. She did wonderfully, obviously, not shocked. But like, what an awkward thing to do.
Okay, but Millie saves everyone. So that story they're telling is Millie, thoroughly modern Millie. Millie saves everybody, right? At the end of the story. So like their story that they created was that this Black woman comes in from a small town and saves all of her white friends from white No.
Questionable on all fronts, absolutely.
It's just like, and even you said it, you saw it at a high school, right?
Yeah.
Why do these high schools always do this show? It's just damaging in every way. And the characters that are like the hotel owners that are like conducting this white slavery ring are supposed to be Asian people. And
right. Oh, it's all
more times than not.
Oh my gosh.
Right. More times than not, it's a young white person putting on the guise of an Asian person, basically yellow face. And we're just like, great, love it. 15-year-olds around the world are gonna gag. We did it. We solved it. Like, what are we teaching our young people, that this is okay?
Oh, yeah, they learn it that way, and they're like, this is fine.
You know, you even have like Tennessee Williams, you know, like some of those, like, yeah, so such classics, but also that's where I'm talking about as far as like timing. Like, is this really the time to like show something that can be very triggering in this like moment? You know what I mean? Things like that
yeah,
I feel like need to be checked, even though those are classics. You know what I mean? I feel like there's a couple of shows that gotta go as far as like, let's say like Taming of the Shrew, things like that of classics. But for me, it's more representation, mostly right now. So there's shows like You Can't Take It With You. I love that show. I think that show, the structure of that show is so smart, such a funny show, but you have the only people represented, or who are the servants, are usually Black actors, and it is written that way. And like you know, PCPA did it at the time, and which it was an amazing performance, and it was such a good show. But like, I know like from the actors involved, it's like, yeah, it was great, but I mean, we were just like the servants in the show. So for me, like, it's things like that need to be very much like looked at, and that's just my opinion on like things that need to be shared with the community. So like, that's an example of a show, but it really comes down to representation, and also not obviously casting in what was written, right? Like, we're not gonna do in the Heights, like you see that all the time, In the Heights being done all over the place with a non Latino cast. Like, so it's just like, what are we doing here? What are you guys trying to like tell?
What show has to go?
I really think that it's time to go for Neil LaBute.
Oh, yes.
Just like, and I know he's like picked a lot for like beginning college freshmen because like the actions are very clear, is like what I've been told or whatever. But I feel like there's better artists out there, or artists that want, like Neil LaBute, like his mind in some way, like he's unafraid of showing the horrendousness of white cis men, but we live in that. And It is time for theater to challenge that narrative and say, no, it's time to reimagine everything. It's time to reimagine what a world with justice built into the system looks like. It's time to like make all these types of stories that like are normally segregated within a season or tokenized or never gets to a place where the artists get to make a living wage about it, because it's maybe only ever gets readings here and there and never a full production. It's time for those to have like full spaces at the table. And it's time for like some stories to like, we've lived this present and this past, and we need to acknowledge that we don't want it to be our future. So it's not even necessarily like him or even like his work, even though there's plenty of plays within his work that I'm like, I never need to read or see or anything about this play ever again. But it's just more that like that specific of like, let's just show how depraved people are. We know how depraved people are. We have children in cages at our border right now. We know how depraved people can be. We have an epidemic of Black folks being shot in the street in broad daylight over and over again. We know. And I'm just done with those stories. I'm done.
What's the show that's got to go? What do you think?
Okay, my show that's got to go is The Mikado.
Okay.
It's got to go.
Tell me about it.
I was really thinking about this question, and for the most part, I kept going back to, it's not the show, it's the direction. And I kept thinking about shows that like, yeah, that's a really rough run to pull off, but if you look at it differently, if you try it again, if you gender switch, or if you colorblind cast or more intentionally cast other people of color, then it could all sort of work. And then I kept going back to The Mikado of, there's no way that this can work. Like, there's no good way, because if you make it all Japanese people because it's set in a fictional Japan, then it's a parody of itself, because it's inappropriately finding these stereotypes and pulling on them, and the names themselves, are inescapably racist. And then if you make it all white people, obviously it's racist. So it's like, I can't find a way to make it work. I've thought about a lot of different ways you could try it, and it's still bad. So mine is The Mikado. It's still one of the most done Gilbert and Sullivan pieces in the US. It's done especially by like younger kids, high school and elementary students. And you're like, this isn't comedy. This is just racism.
In your theater canon, what is a show that has to go?
Oh God, there's so many. But you know which the shows that I always just get shivers when I hear they're being produced? Kiss Me, Kate.
Yep.
And Guys and Dolls.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what? Who chose this? How did you decide that these themes, these more like, when did you choose that this music and this I don't know, marketability was more important than what is actually being said? You know what I mean?
Ding, 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 ding.
It behooves me that these, and it's not just big houses. It's like, everybody does these shows all the time still.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just won't do it. Like, I'll go in, I'll audition if I get invited. But if anyone ever offers me a role in Kiss Me, Kate, I honestly don't know what I'll do. If it's no money, I'll obviously not do it. But like, it's just bewildering. So yeah, those are my shows.
Now, to dichotomize that question, I love to ask, what shows people want to see in the canon? What shows do we want to bring in and support and build community around? What shows need to be canon? So let's tune back in and see what shows each guest thought needed to be in the canon.
Yeah, a show that I think I want to see produced more, and I also want to see more people knowing it, is a musical called Passing Strange. It was written, the lyrics and book are by Stu, and the music is Heidi, what's her last name? Heidi Rodewald, and Stu both contributed the music to it. It is a rock musical, kind of almost concert style in some of its aesthetics, about a young Black artist who moves from America to Europe in like the 1970s. And it's a lot about identity, and it's about the experience of being an artist, and understanding your, specific to this character, like his race, in conjunction to his art. And feeling, you know, the title is Passing Strange, and it does engage in the idea of what does it mean to be, you know, like passing, both as, you know, we talk about like white passing people, but also the idea of like passing as an idea or passing as a stereotype. There's a fully like professionally filmed version of it that is available. I don't think it's on any streaming websites right now, but it is pretty easy to get a hold of through, like, you can like rent it through the iTunes store for like $4. I think there is like, if you have a IFC film collection subscription, which I think has a free trial, you can get access to it. It's incredibly well filmed, and it's the original Broadway production. And it is such a good show, and I just don't see it done hardly often at all. It was kind of a little bit of a critical darling at its time, but I think it got kind of buried under a lot of other of the late 2000s stuff.
Okay, I thought about this also a lot because, I don't know, I was just thinking about like the future of theater and kind of like what would be important and beneficial at this time. And so the two plays that truly come to mind is Slave Play by Jeremy O. Harris and Passover by Antoinette Nwandu. And I think both of these plays are beneficial because, I mean, specifically with Slave Play, I mean, it's a play that kind of deconstructs African-American trauma that doesn't really seem like it's for African-American people. It actually seems like it's more for white subscribers and your white audience. And I think that is beneficial, as just like being an African-American actor, being able to just like say these truths and guide the audience there. And I also think it's good for white people to watch and see and cringe a little bit and, you know, understand how trauma can travel through generations. So that's a really brilliantly written play. But like moving on to like Passover, Antoinette Nwandu, she wrote Passover because she had two students. She was a college professor, and she had two students in the class. There were two African-American boys, and they kind of were like they were very codependent on each other in class, and like it felt like they would like sometimes like interrupt class playfully, and one of the boys just went missing. Like one of the boys just stopped like going to class, and she had started to build like a relationship with them, and she had found out that like one of the boys had gotten arrested, and that's like why he couldn't return to class. And so she like decided to write this play kind of paralleling Gatto, because she's a big fan of Beckett's work, and I think that also does a really successful job of like making this like classic, right? Like everyone knows Waiting for Gatto. Like it's like,
even if you don't know it, you've heard of it.
You've heard of it, and you've never actually read it, because what people tell you is that it's so long and it's boring. Like, and
then you do it in class and you say,
and then and your acting teacher tries so hard to make this play alive for you. And there were so many things about Gatto that I was like, wow, I wish I could understand this in a modern contextual sense, but I just don't. And then I saw Passover and I was like, oh my God, this is everything that Amy Thone was trying so hard, trying to pull out of us.
Well, I will say this, the show that I have picked, people will argue with me about it because it definitely was a big thing and might have been canon because it was written in the 70s. It might have been canon for a while, but I definitely think it has largely disappeared from most theaters across the country. It is For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide / When the Rainbow Is Enough. And I saw an iteration of The Public that was done at The Public last fall in 2019 that was beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And I think the reason that I picked that show, or that I want that show to be done more again, to come more into like this generation to see that, is mainly the fact that it's only brown women on stage. There are no white people on stage. And I think we need to normalize in the canon shows in which there are literally no white characters. Because that's how the world looks in a lot of different places and a lot of different parts of America. And I think that showing, having like needing that one white character. I'm like, why? And that was a huge thing we heard when we first did Raised in a Glass of Milk, and we had 6 brown people, me being like like having one mixed character that is like mostly white but still like not appearing white on stage. A main thing we heard from people was, you should add a white person. Literally so many people.
I'm sorry, did they watch the show? Like,
yeah, I was like, did you watch it? I don't, like, you didn't get it.
I can't believe, whoa, dude.
They were like, you're missing a perspective. You could use it for your advantage. I don't even know what the arguments were, because the second that they said it, I was like, meh. Nope.
It's like, are you missing a perspective? Am I missing a perspective, or are you missing a perspective?
Yeah, and I'm like, the amount of shows that I just think that we need to normalize white audiences being able to see a show, and even if they don't see someone that looks like themselves on stage, still being able to relate to it, because at the end of the day, we're humans and we have very different experiences that need to be listened to, but also we need to be able to see each other as humans, to be able to see ourselves in everybody else, because that's how we get that empathy, and if we can't change anything without that empathy. And so I think that we need to normalize that again. And it terrifies people. Like, we weren't even doing it for money, and like people were worried for us. And I'm like, imagine theaters when they have to make money are like, we're gonna show our mostly white audience a show with no white people in it. Like, they were like, it's like it's terrifying, and I don't want it to be terrifying. Because that doesn't mean that you can't. It's like, we need to get rid of that idea that just because of that, I will not be able to relate to the show. We need to take that wall and break it down with a
hammer. Yeah, well, my favorite musical of all time, well, I shouldn't say that. My favorite musical right now is Once on This Island, and it has been forever. Do you know that musical, Once on This Island?
I've heard of it, so I don't know too much. So let us know what it's about.
It's beautiful. It's about this young girl who is adopted into this wonderful family. They live on the island of Haiti, and she falls in love, and she has to make some huge choices, and she has to grow up really quickly. And she is guided by, the spirit of love, the spirit of the earth, the spirit of water. All these gods are on her side the whole time, and it's gorgeous. It's just storytelling in the best, most beautiful, simple way. The music is lovely, and the cast is always 100% blackity black, and I love that. I'm rooting for anybody black. Yeah. So yes. The original show came out in the 90s, I think, and they just had a revival. I prefer the original just because LaShawne's was in it, and I love LaShawne's. She's like one of my idols. Yeah, I love Once on This Island, and I just don't see theater companies do it as much. I feel like a lot of the times theaters will segregate their season, that's typical.
Like one black show, one, like that type of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, in the name of equity and inclusion, they'll put one black show in and say that they did it. But what they're doing is counterproductive because they're segregated. You have all your white people in these shows, and then you have all your black people. You do Hairspray. You do...
Yeah, and no one gets to be friends. What are you talking about?
Exactly.
Like, yeah, but also like supporting both types, like where there's lots of different types of people in the cast, and also like casts that are completely black, because hell yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Why can't a theater company have a season that like only has people of color? There are many theater companies that have seasons that are only white folks.
Waiting for the response from theater companies on that one.
Hello.
Tell us more.
Right. So yeah, I love Once on This Island. It's beautiful and it's honest.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of shows. For me, there's a beautiful show called Water by the Spoonful. That is just incredible, and it has it's a Latin cast, like Latino lead, but also has like a lot of represented ethnicities, and it has to do with the relationships you have through the internet as well. So it hits a lot of different like areas that like people are experiencing right now. And great stories, like very so like visual. It makes you want to read it. It's part of a trilogy, but it's usually done by itself. So you get to see the characters like basically it's the before and after of Water by the Spoonful. But definitely one that I feel like people should read. That is so good.
Is it a play or is it based on a book? Or
it is a play.
Okay. When you say it's a trilogy, is it a book too?
Oh no, it's a trilogy of plays.
Oh, dope.
Yeah, so like she did write the Water by the Spoonful first, but then she ended up making it a 3-part series, and it's so good. So good.
I think anything written by Benjamin Benet needs to be more widely known. Ben is like an amazing Latinx playwright. He writes just really gorgeous, rich, complex characters, and there's just like there's magic in poetry in his words, but then there's sometimes like actual magic and literal poetry in the work. And it is always coming from a place of like love and curiosity, and I just love his work. And his work needs to be everywhere.
What's your favorite of his pieces?
I love Querencia. Querencia to me is, I feel like it's this I feel like people could study it and make it like, it to me is like a Latinx glass menagerie, because it is a memory play, and it's a memory play of like, how do we move forward from pain, but also how do we look back at our memories, and it's a coming out story, it's a coming of age story, it's generational healing. It is so many people's story that I just feel that it is such a necessary one to see. And it's about how sometimes love can hurt us, or like those who love us, those who we love the most have the highest capacity of hurting us, right? Because they're the closest to us.
Yeah. They know us too well.
Yeah. That's why family dramas, like they're still compelling, right? So
seriously.
I don't know if this answers that question, but I will talk about the favorite show the best show I've ever seen.
Yes.
This is very fringe, very specific. I went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival before I went to Cornish, so I think it was the summer of 2015. It was just before we started school.
Yeah.
And I saw the Scotland theater company, like it was a home theater company in beautiful big stage, who had prepared a sort of 3-show tiny season for like the days of the Fringe Festival. I mean, we saw them every night, as well as tons of shows throughout the day. And they did a show called The Destroyed Room. And it started with 3 people on stage having a sort of candid conversation, as if it were possibly a podcast interview. It was very structured in its conversation. Somebody had a lot of questions, but it wasn't really clear that it was like an interview or something like that. It was a conversation about Jeff Wall, who's a photographer. It was a photograph of a ransacked room. It was sort of in the middle of the stage, and they were talking about this photo, and it brought about the conversation of whether I'm going to use their words, whether we take the tragedies of the modern world and neutralize it by treating them as a form of entertainment. So essentially talking about social media and how we see tragedies constantly through something like a Facebook feed, and is seeing it all the time neutralizing it for us and allowing us to become numb to that tragedy, or is it spreading awareness and allowing us to take action and learn more about what's happening around the world? And it went in 100 different directions. It was a beautiful piece. What I loved the most about it was its the way that it treated the soundscape, the direction, essentially, I thought was just gorgeous, and I just fell in love with it, and it made me want to be a director. Paint the picture here. We have the three people on stage. They're debating, semi-arguing. At some points, it's heated. Towards the end, as it gets more and more heated, they start to talk about this horrible footage of our youth. At the time, it was mostly about the immigrant crisis, and those like heartbreaking footages that we have of, you know, a father carrying his dead baby onto the beach, you know, from the boat that he, you know, this Iranian prisoner being shot in the head in a cage. These just horrible images. One of the women gets so upset. It's two women and one man. One of the women gets so upset that she runs out of the room. And as soon as she runs out of the room at the end of the show, then you notice that the floor has been filling with water. The walls of their room were made with some sort of a rice paper or really thin paper. And on the tops of them, then water had been trickling down and the walls have slowly disappeared. As she runs out, she pushes over the table. The last two people look at each other and leave, and this sound that has been sort of a white noise through the whole show gets louder and louder and louder and louder until there's like unbelievably uncomfortable buzz in your ears. The show, which has been using cameras on stage the whole time, zooming in on these little pieces of the room that are happening on the actors' feet moving and splashing in the water throughout the thing, and they're completely oblivious to it, but it's like happening around them. They suddenly sort of move up to the wall, which projects the wall, which is projecting these horrible images that we've tried to scroll past so many times. All of a sudden, you've absorbed these images. You've like forced yourself to sit through this footage of people around the world dying and needing help and us not doing a goddamn thing. And you realize that we're in the destroyed room we were talking about in the first place. And it's just one of those pieces where you're like, how does everybody not know this? It was beautiful and so well done, and just makes me so emotional even thinking about it. And it was years ago, and wow.
You know, I was having a hard time with this question just because I do have a lot of shows, but you know, the question was in the American theater canon, and I'm not saying there isn't incredible, mindful American theater, but within at least my circle of new work and my circle of shows that I think are more representative and more valuable, they're not American. Like I have heard so many British shows and shows brought to England that I think are, you know, a lot more helpful than the kinds of shows we're seeing in America right now. And
Right, yeah.
but you know, at the same time, I could say things like anything by Antoinette Nwandu is, you know, like, for goodness sakes, like, we need that content, we need that work, we should be listening to her voice, you know? And I would honestly, I was thinking about it too, and I was like, crap, if I could pick the newest, if I could pick a musical that I've seen like in the last 5 years that I wish people could see in order to understand why musical theater is important, I would direct them towards Sarah Porkalob's Dragon Lady.
Yes.
Because I mean, that is literally, yeah, it's just, that is the kind of content that is helpful. It's helpful for not only marginalized voices, which it's very important that it's helpful for, but it's clever, it's worthwhile, it has that creativity that, you know, is supposed to make canon shows special. You know what I mean?
And I can't do a recap without mentioning how many times we talked about Hamilton. Hamilton is such a iconic piece of theater. It is groundbreaking in so many ways and totally on par for this topic. So it naturally had to come up all the time. And so I just wanted to share a couple of my favorite conversations that we had about Hamilton.
Now you have Hamilton, even though there's haters, that's still like such a revolutionary show now, and like it's just to be able to be a part of history and like see it open and everything is just so cool.
Yeah, Hamilton is so interesting because of so many different things. Like, I think it pushes boundaries politically and historically, and also just allows POC actors to be founding fathers, which, like, we know it's no secret that founding fathers were slave owners and were awful people and did all these crazy, awful things that built the culture of this country. But I think allowing like brown bodies to fill those spaces can be like really empowering.
And building it that way.
Yeah, 100%. I think when you understand history and you understand that like we know these things, however, we can still do these narratives in a way that is empowering and beneficial for POC actors, and also for non-POC actors, like, what's his face, who played King George? What is his name?
Jonathan Groff.
Jonathan Groff. Impeccable.
Yeah. Impeccable. I watched the film the other day. Obviously, when it came out, I was just like, Mom, Dad, you have to watch it because theater and culture, and here we are. And the walk that I had never seen before that he uses when he enters, and then when he's on the stage during Reynolds' pamphlet, my jaw hit the floor. I had no idea that happened. He's just like in this fever dream of the Reynolds pamphlet.
Yeah. I was like, just like, what does he do? He's like flossing. He like flosses at one point.
Yes, he does.
The spit. The
oh my God, the saliva. Acting.
So good. Clown work, impeccable.
Clown work. Truly, he did do some clown work on that right there.
I am really excited for the theoretical future of not too long when Hamilton is available for like amateur rights for schools, because I think that'll be really exciting. I think that actually is a show that is super accessible for younger people to do, that I don't think is quite as like difficult to deal with the issues of, and especially thinking towards like high schools that are not predominantly white. The idea that there is this show that is really successful and will really get people in seats, that is not designed to be done by white people.
It's not like Christmas.
It's
or
such an
Oklahoma.
exciting, it's such an exciting prospect of like thinking about schools where the theater program probably has minimal resources because, you know, our education system tries to punish people for not being, you know, middle class or above. And the idea of, you know, schools like that being able to access a show like that will get kids so excited is so exciting to me. And especially seeing those kids then go into careers of more theater making.
I also could not recap this season without revisiting the amazing stories as told by María Campoy. So that's coming up. And I also couldn't finish this out without gushing over Raisins in a Glass of Milk for at least a few more minutes. So those clips are right here for you.
Favorite story of like of compelling family drama, Oedipus. I had a teacher in college who told me about touring rural Texas in the 70s. So like 70s, rural Texas, okay? And they're performing, and it's like a professional theater troupe performing Oedipus in like, we're like in these teeny tiny towns. Like they are the art and culturals like touchstone for that community for like the next 6 months to a year. And they're doing one of the monologues in Oedipus Rex, and there's like a moment of silence for drama. And in the back of the room, you just hear, "Oh my gosh, she's his mother." I'm like, that's why stories can be like, that's to like, we still love family dramas. There's still elements of surprise for some of us.
Gosh.
Yeah. And that's how amazing theater is.
Oh, I love that so much. Like, she was so invested, it came out loud. Oh my gosh.
She was his mother. I'm like, God bless that woman. Best audience member.
I love that. Oh,
The thing I love so much about Raisins is that it has literally endless possibilities. And I think you guys created it in this way that is just like, anyone could have said anything at any time and perfect, you know?
Yeah.
They were all those like interviews. And I remember when you guys were doing it, because that was like the year we met. Like I met you when that came up, and I was like, I'm even more enamored. Like, I already loved you guys so much. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool.
Yeah, I'll never forget, we were backstage of when we were doing singing, and you and a couple other of the freshmen who had seen it repeated one of the lines back to us, and I was like, oh my God, they just repeated our play back to us. Are we famous now? I think that we're famous now.
Yeah, like, you created so many like really repeatable, like, you can grab onto a lot of the things that were in those shows, especially like, you know, white people.
Yep.
Like, you have to. Even white people are going to be like, honestly, tea.
Yeah.
You know? It just happens.
I know.
It was such ingenious. It was ingenious, like, truly, to make that like a moment. So I love that.
I remember seeing Raisins the first time and being like there was a big roller coaster of emotions. I know this is a podcast and I just did a physical response, but watch the video. But like it was a roller coaster of like, for someone who didn't grow up in like the same situations, obviously. Like, there's no dancing around that. You guys educated me in that moment, and you took that time, and the whole audience, really. Like, a lot of our school is white where we went together. We know each other. Like, and it was impactful to everyone who watched it. I didn't see anyone who was like, meh, like, you know? And so just like you had for you a beautiful story to like feel encouraged by, like, look what it encouraged you to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's lovely to hear, you know. Lexi and I always talk about when approaching the next rendition of Raisins, we ask, who is this for? You know, like, why do we do it? And every time at the end of it, we come back to, it's for everyone, you know, like, which is kind of like, you know, taking the easy way out. It's like, hey, everybody come down. Yeah. But I really think it is. I mean, for people of color, it's a cathartic experience. You're like, for the first time, for a lot of people, it's like, wow, this person is speaking the thoughts that I've had for so long that I've just kept to myself, or that I've whispered in the green room, or that I've, you know, only, you know, that I don't really speak out loud. And it's like such a blessing that we're able to tell these stories, and that people trust us enough with their stories to shape them in the way that we do. I mean, we don't change any of the words at all. Everything is verbatim as possible. The only thing we do is cut things out for clarity and for story, but
style it how you want to for that rendition. Like, there have been so many different styles also.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's really nice to hear that it's impact you as a white person, because we've heard from a lot of white people and they're not too happy.
Really?
Yes. So white folks, every single rendition we have at least 2 white people say, I loved it, that was so great, but have you ever thought about putting white people in it?
Lexi said that last time when we were having this conversation, and I was shocked. I was like, you missed the whole dang point.
That's exactly it, Danielle. I'm like, it's disheartening. You're like, I've spent technically a whole year on this piece, pouring in all this loving, painful hours of like attention and detail and thought. And all that you took away from it was,
it needs white people.
It needs white people. You have a lot of work to do on yourself, my friend.
Let's put a giant question mark next to your life, my dude.
it's disappointing, and I have to learn that you can't control people's reactions. You just got to put the work out and hope that it impacts the right person.
Exactly.
But yeah, so thanks for saying all those nice things. Oh my gosh.
Maybe it's my relationship with you guys, and you guys were just great mentors for me in my first year at Cornish. Like, I don't know what it was. I just have obviously always adored you as like minds and creatives and like just people and human beings. And so like to get this beautiful piece of work, like some senior thesis projects don't go as well as planned. And just like, I remember being a freshman sitting in 102, just like watching the first piece with some of my friends in it, and then like walking away dumbfounded and also like in awe and adoration, which is why I've always like tried to come when I could to your pieces. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just know that you are impacting the people who want to listen.
Thank you.
That's
like, so kind. And it's encouraging. Yeah.
People are wild. People want to see Thoroughly Modern Millie, and I don't know why.
Thank you so much for listening to the recap. I got to interview some amazing people.
And I just want to really shout out, there are so many fantastic collectives that these artists and actors and creators are a part of that I want to shout out right now. The very first one is Raisins in a Glass of Milk, as you know from Lexi and Maya's episodes. They are the co-writers and founders of Raisins. And actually right now you can go to Raisins in a Glass of Milk's Instagram and check the link in their bio to get involved and donate to support the final, I think, $4,000 that they need to put on their 2021 show. They have meant so much to me, so I would love to have you guys help them out and get to that goal so that we can all have Raisins 2021 and experience that together. I will definitely keep you posted on when that is on my Instagram, as well as we've got Wash Masks is still taking donations with María talked about that on her episode. So they work with families around Washington to help migrant farm workers and their families have access to masks and books and food and be able to live their lives as normally as possible during this pandemic, since they have been super affected by it. I also want to shout out the Young Hot Thespians. They just dropped their Instagram account and their awesome piece of theater video film called Black 365. Please go check that out. It's on YouTube. It is also connected to their Instagram, so check out YHT, the Young Hot Thespians, on Instagram. And last but definitely not least, we have the Dirty Darlings, who are a narrative burlesque troupe, who are fantastic. And they also just announced their February show. So please go to the Dirty Darlings Instagram account, also linked below. The Dirty Darlings are having a Valentine's show. So if you want to check out their Valentine's show exclusively on Patreon, go to the Dirty Darlings Presents and get involved there. And it is bound to be a beautiful, fun, and sexy time. So I think you should do that. I want to thank you guys so much for listening and watching all my weird hand gestures if you're watching on the internet. This has been a really fun passion project, and I'm so excited to keep it going as long as humanly possible. If you are at all interested in supporting the podcast, something I pride myself on is that I want to pay artists for their time. So not very many podcasts pay their guests. And because I'm talking about emotional labor from my actors and artists and creators, I wanted to be able to offer compensation of some kind. And I've been able to afford that because of some amazing donations I've gotten from people who are also passionate about what I am creating here. So if you are at all interested in helping me continue through multiple seasons, I'm going to have a link to my Venmo down in the descriptions. If you are interested in contributing donations to help me pay my guests and have more episodes for you, that link will also be down in the description. I thank you so much. I'm so excited to see where this takes us. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you back next week for season 2 of the Next Canon podcast. Goodbye.